Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I am going to discuss about the concept of TCP attack methods, Transmission Control Protocol attack methods. So, in the networking area, Transmission Control Protocol helps a lot to communicating more than one layers. So, to communicate all the layers individually and to communicate all the protocols individually, the layers has to be established. Due to that layers, the protocols were established. So here the TCP transmission control protocol helps a lot of protocols to implement at each level. So here the TCP IP. So TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol and IP stands for Internet Protocol. Its suite is a collection of various communication protocols operating over the internet. That is nothing but a public internet. So you are going to access. And it is considered a reliable protocol because it guarantees packet delivery and incorporates error detection and correcting mechanisms. So here the protocol is reliable protocol because it says that it gives the guarantees that packet delivery as well as it detects that error detection and error correcting mechanisms. So it identifies the packet delivery along with the errors that identified or errors that detected for the correcting mechanisms. And here different mechanisms used by TCP to ensure packet delivery are sequence numbers or acknowledgements or three-way handshake and timers. So the transmission control protocol helps us to provide a synchronous request as well as synchronous response as well as synchronous acknowledgement. So at the time of this delivering these messages, it identifies that sequence numbers, acknowledgements and three-way handshake and timers. These are all the mechanisms used by the TCP to ensure that packet has been delivered to the destination or not. So at the time of transmission of the data, with the help of this transmission protocol, some of the attacks are there. Some of the attacks will be available. Some of the attacks will be attacked by the attacker during the transmission. So what are the different types of attack methods in the TCP protocol? So the first one is what? TCP synchronous attacks. TCP synchronous attacks. And the second one is what? IP spoofing attacks. IP spoofing attacks. And third one is what? Connection hijacking attacks. And fourth one, routing information protocol attacks. And fifth one, ICMP attacks. So Internet Control Management Protocol. So ICMP stands for Internet Control Management Protocol. And DNS spoofing attacks. Domain name server or domain name space attacks. So these are all the attacks methods of TCP we are going to discuss right now. So the first one is what? TCP synchronous attacks. So this attack is caused by the three-way handshake mechanism. So three-way handshake mechanism refers that the synchronous gives a request, and synchronous gives a response, and for that request and response there is acknowledgement. For TCP. So this is the three-way handshake mechanism used between host and the server. So host is nothing but this is the user or host and this is the server. So host and the server to set up a connection. A server has limited resources. There is nothing but limited connections. So that gives the response to the limited hosts actually. Once it responds to a synchronous request using synchronous acknowledgement, it sets aside resources for this connection and listens for acknowledgement from client. So once gives the response, the synchronous response, they are going to give some resources. They are going to give some resources for this connection and listens for acknowledgement from client. So then the two host and server are going to connect the resources in between the systems. So if the attacker sends multiple synchronous within a very short interval, then the server will exhaust its resources. The server will exhaust the resources because it tries to requesting for more number of times. So at that time, what will happen? The server gets loaded. The server gets loaded. So at that time, that server resources will exhausted. The server resources will exhausted. So that attacker does not respond to synchronous acknowledgement sent by the server. So attacker does not give the response to the synchronous acknowledgement by the server, and the connections are left half open. And the server connections are left half open. So here, one thing we have to understand that what the TCP is half open. The TCP is half open and the TCP is full open. So here, half open stands for there is a synchronous request to the server and the synchronous response from the server. But the user is not going to give any response because they are trying to attack on the server, attack on the target system. So that the attacker never gives a response. The attacker never gives a response to the target system. So that is called as half open system. So that's why you can mention that here half opened. It is a half opened. Now server is unable to respond to further connection request because exhaustion of resources or denial of service takes place. Right. So the server gives a response for the client request. At that time, client does not make any acknowledgement to the server. So that is half open. And the full open, the server is going to give the response from the host request, as well as gives acknowledgement for the server responses. Gives the acknowledgement for the server responses. So that is the three-way handshake completed. So that itself, it is a full open. Full open. So the diagram shows that the TCP synchronous attacks. So here, the user is trying to access the target system. User gives a request, then server gives a response, and then user gives an acknowledgement to the system, so that the user can connect between the server as well as host. So now we can access the resources from the server. But when the hacker point of view, the hacker gives a synchronous request to the server, then server gives a synchronous response to the user, so that user cannot give any responses or acknowledgement to the server, so that the server gives a bad connection. That means server is not going to connect with that attacker because of the attacker does not responding. So this is the way the synchronous attacks will happen in the real-time communication systems. And the second one is IP spoofing. So IP address spoof involves maliciously creating TCP IP packets using other IP addresses as a source addresses. So here what we have to do, so the attacker creates a separate TCP IP packet using other IP address as a source address. He just want to create another spoof address with the same address, but he is going to create a duplicate or malicious address. So the aim to either conceal own identity or impersonate the identity of the owner of the IP address used. So what his intention is, the IP address of the owner's identity is going to be impersonated. So to lose their identity or to steal that identity, he is going to attack on that IP address spoofing. So routers use the IP address of the destination and forward the packet to it. The recipient uses the IP address of the source to reply to the packet. So the routers are going to use the communication for source and destination with the help of the IP addresses. Once it gives the request to the router sends the response to the packet. If the source address is spoofed, If the source address is spoofed, the recipient will reply to the spoofed address. So recipient, whoever going to take the responses from take the request from the client, is going to reply the spoofed address. Also, the packet will be hard to trace it back to the attacker. So the packet tracing is also, it is somewhat difficult. So, but in this case, if the attacker wants to access the reply, also, he will have to sniff the traffic of the spoofed address also. He will have to sniff the data, sniff the traffic of the spoofed address also. This behavior of the recipient can be used to launch various attacks as described below. So he is going to launch some different types of attacks like denial of service attacks. So here, based on the IP address or based on the domain name, they are going to spoof that address, spoof that IP address or spoof that domain name address. They are going to launch the attacks on the target system. So the denial of service attack. The main intention of this attack is to deny the service of user want to target on the system. So the targeted system is going to deny the services. So here the attacker can send a large number of packets. So he is going to send, this is the server and this is the user, he is going to send large number of packets. So packet 1, packet 2, up to number of packets he is going to send to the victim when he does not care about the replies from the victim, because he will not receive any packet from the victim. So his intention is not to get any replies from the victim. Just he want to send a number of packets to the victim. So all the replies will be directed towards the spoofed IP addresses. All the replies will be directed towards the spoofed IP addresses. And also the identity of the attacker will also not be disclosed. That is not exhibited. This attack causes the victim to go out of service. So once the multiple number of replies are going to be targeting on the system, automatically the system is going to be downstate. So hence the identity of the attacker will also not be disclosed. So this is the denial of service attacks scenario we can see here. So this is the valid user. He is going to use the service. About some company. But the attacker is going to access this internet work with the help of this source address. He is going to be contacting with the server. So that at some particular point of time, his attacker is going to spoof this IP address, so that he is going to be attack on the target system. So this is the way denial of service attacks will happen in the real-time communication. So user is going to be use the IP address or domain address to spoof that IP address or to spoof that domain address for targeting servers. And how we are going to defeating that services, defeating that attacks. So what we can do? We can do defeating network security, one defensive mechanism. So defeating network security. This kind of attacks is mostly used against IP-based authentication environments where internal machines are configured to trust communication from internal IP addresses. So they have to configure the internet settings or network settings all to be very secure, or trusted communication with the help of or from internal IP addresses. And the attacker can spoof the connection between two machines to get unauthorized access to a victim machine without authentication. So the attacker wants to do what? Without authentication, he wants to access the system. So that he spoofed the connection between two machines. To get unauthorized access to the victim machine without communication, without authentication. So that is nothing but defeating network security attacks. That means they are going to launch the attacks against the network configuration settings. That is nothing but network connection settings. Network connection settings. And next one, man in the middle attacks. Man in the middle attacks. It involves hijacking an unauthenticated network session between two hosts. Between two hosts. So they are going to hijack the authenticated network. So the authenticated network is gives a chance to hijacking the network. The attacker, when they finish authentication steps, so the attacker can spoof the IP address of a victim that authenticated by other hosts or server and get packets that pass between these hosts. These hosts. So here the attacker uses IP address of two hosts and users uses them to receive and send packets. So he is the mediator role, or he is the person in the middle of both two hosts or host and server. He is the person in middle of the host and server. He'll take the request from host, spoofing that address, and he is going to send that request to the server. Once the server is identified the request, the server gives the response to the attacker, and this attacker is going to modify that server response and gives to the victim. So this is the way man in the middle attacks will launch in the real-time communication system. And defense against IP spoofing techniques. So to how we can defend these IP spoofing attacks. So following measures can be taken to prevent spoofing attacks. So here the first one is what? Use of encrypted session in router. So we are going to configure encrypted sessions. That means we are going to give the particular timing for the particular encrypted format or encrypted data. So through the use of encryption in the routers, the trusted hosts can communicate securely. So by giving that encryption routers, we are going to trusted that hosts can communicate securely. So with the help of local hosts, as the attacker will not be able to read the packets and will not be able to spoof the packets. So once the trusted communication or trusted encryption communication will be there, then the attacker is not able to read the packets as well as is not able to spoof the packets also. And the second one is what? Using access control list. So access control list helps in applying security policy. Based on the security policies standards, they are going to use that. So the access control list can be configured to block any traffic coming from outer network. He is going to block all that outer network data. So with an internal IP address, and likewise blocking traffic from internal IPs to go to outside the network. So from this is internal and this is the external. So once the access control established, security policy standards are going to be block this outer data into the internal network, or this is blocked by the internal IP addresses or internal firewalls to do not send outer side. So like the way they are going to block the traffic from outer to inner or inner to outer, so that these IP addresses are only used inside of the network. And next, third one, filtering packets. So this involves blocking incoming packets which does not meet the security policy criteria. So those are coming packets from external network that are not able to meet the security policy criteria, like ping requests from outside the network are to be filtered. So likewise, outgoing packets can also be filtered based on the source or destination port or IP address criteria. So from outer side to inner side, the packets are transmitted. At the time, the packets are going to be filtered because of they are not meet the security policy criteria. And next one, using upper layers. So incorporating defense mechanisms in upper layers can prevent IP spoofing, like use of sequence numbers in TCP at a transport layer. So the attacker has to guess the sequence number also before spoofing the packet. So he has to find the sequence number or a sequence parameters index he has to identify. So the upper layer contains what the next payload of the protocol. So it does not gives a chance to identify the next packet what is actually, so that the security of the transmission will be there. And the third one is what? Connection hijacking. Connection hijacking. So authentication between two hosts. Authentication between two hosts take place during the initial stages of connection setup. So at the time of connection setup, the initial stages has to take the place. So there is an authentication between two hosts actually. The attacker can take advantage of this by sending a reset to the client, by sending a reset option to the client and killing the connection for the client. So before going to establish the connection, the attacker is going to send a reset option to the client, so that the user is thinking like what? The server is going to ask me to reset. So now he is going to reset the connection. So at that time, what will happen? After then, the attacker spoof that client and continues the session with the server using spoofed source address. So he is going to restarting the connection, and at the time, meanwhile at the time, the attacker is going to use that connection to communicate the server. So the other way of session hijacking is exploiting authenticated machine by stealing the cookies stored on that machine. So the internal stored information is called as cookies, and by stealing that cookies stored on that machine, or stealing cookies by sniffing the unencrypted network traffic, is going to hijack the sessions. So then these cookies can be used with the web server to establish an authenticated session. So here is the scenarios. Those two are how they are going to authenticate the connections. So user and a server. So in between these, they are going to create a secure connection. So that is an authenticated connection. So this is the source address and this is the server address. So now what actually attacker is going to do? So once user is having this address and the hacker is going to have this address. So what he wants to do at the time of connection, initial stages of the connection, the hacker is going to send a reset request. A hacker is going to send a reset request to the client. So now the client thinks that the server is asking me to reset the connection. So that what user is going to do? User is going to killing that connection for the client. So now the hacker is going to use this connection. Now user is going to ignores the replies from this server. So this is the way the session hijacking or connection hijacking will be takes place in the communication security. So what are the defensive techniques against this connection hijacking attacks? So the first one is what? Encryption. So encryption secures that the traffic between hosts and an attacker may see the traffic, but neither is be able to read the contents of the packets, or he can use them for the session hijacking. So the encryption is main role in between the two hosts, because they are going to maintain the authenticated connection, right? So that they have to use that encryption method. And using re-authentication, the requirement of authenticating periodically after a specified period of time will cause the attacker to lose sessions after some time, even if he initially succeeded. So this may prevent further exploitation of the access. So you need to take the re-authentication method actually. And session timeouts. So session timeouts are again a mechanism for enforcing re-authentication after a specified amount of time. So that hijacked session is not exploited perpetually. So session timeouts are again you have to reschedule. And the next one, routing information protocol attacks. So routing information protocol is a routing protocol used in TCP IP suite to route packets based on hop count. Based on hop count. Before making a routing decision, routing information protocol counts the number of hops on every path available. So it finds the number of hops that are available on routing. So then it takes the packets to forward the to the destination based on the routes. So here it dispatches the packet on the path with minimum hops to the destination. So it identifies the channel and it identifies the number of paths that are available on this route, and now it sends the packets to the destination based on the minimum number of paths that are available. So at that moment the attacker can forge routing information protocol routing updates. So he's going to do what? Attacker going to sit somewhere and he's monitoring all these routes he is going to manage, he is going to monitor. So now the routing protocol updates the advertised at least cost path to the target node. This will cause the routing information protocol to route all packets to the target node through attacker, as he is considered the nearest target node. He is considered as the nearest target node. So he finds the nearest target one and he's taking the packets nearest he stands by. So the attacker can use this to launch any attack on the target node. So now after poisoning this packet, the attacker is going to attack on the targeting system with the help of this routing information protocol attack. So he just identifies how the route is and how the packet is going through this route to the destination side. So this is the way you can understand routing information protocol. Here, Z is the attacker, and these are all protocols. These are all the packets that are transmitted to the destination side. So here, Z attacker going to claims that he has the best route for A and B. He says that he is the best route for A and B, and X and Y always route packets through Z destined for the A and B. So he's advertising bogus information to the all packets. This is the right route, you have to travel through these routes. So that packets are going to use that route by launching that attacks. So defensive techniques against routing information protocols. So here the defenses against routing information protocol attacks the vulnerability in routing information protocol caused by the lack of authentication. So the secure authentication is not probably there. The focus of most of the mitigation effort is an incorporating authentication into routing information protocol. So following are some of the countermeasures against the routing information protocol. So the first one is what? Use of encryption. Use of encryption should be must. And next, filtering packets based on source and destination. Filtering packets based on source and destination. The next, frequent log analysis aimed at anomaly detection. Frequent log analysis. So every time we have to take the records of each and every packet and how that is going to be transmitted to the destination. So frequent log analysis has to be recorded. And check the routes before acceptance. Once the route is established, then the packets are going to be delivered to the destination side. So these are the defensive techniques against that routing information protocol attacks. Next one, ICMP attacks. So Internet Control Message Protocol. So ICMP stands for Internet Control Message Protocol. Is a protocol used in internet layer. For this internet layer, the IP is the main protocol for this ICMP, and IGMP is the other protocols for this IP. So he's the protocol suite to send error messages and carry out network management tasks. So most familiar example of ICMP is the ping tool, which is used to send echo message so as to know the online status of the destination. So That ping command is used to find the status of the destination, whether it is reaching towards or not. The ICMP protocol does not have any authentication built in, and the attacker can intercept ICMP packets. So he is going to send ICMP packets because of this does not have any authentication built in, so that he is going to attack or launch the attacks on this target system. So here the ping command, ping utility is can be used to launch DOS attacks. DOS attack, that is nothing but denial of service attacks. Denial of service attack he is going to launch with the help of ping command. And this is the way the attacker is going to sit here, and this is the attacker's IP address, and these are all the intermediates, and this is the target system. So here the attacker is going to send all the requests to the target system. For any message, the target system is going to gives the reply. Then attacker is going to use that network to send some replies to the target system. So at the time of requesting to the target system, the target may send some replies to the attacker. So now attacker is going to launch the attacks on this target system, so that the target mission is attacked by this attacker. So this is the way you can understand ICMP echo attacks. And here some of the defensive techniques are there. The defense against ICMP attacks may include the following. So checking if the packet belongs to the same connection or not. So sending packet is belongs to the same connection or not. That is what you have to understand. And the changes in routes names should be authorized to a particular connection or not. So changing the routes are particular authorized or not. And the reply packet should be accepted at a particular time. So at a particular time, immediate response has to be take over the packet of attacker. And the sixth one, DNS spoofing attacks. So here DNS stands for what? Domain name system. Is a service used in application layer. To map an IP address to the domain name. So mapping of IP address to the domain name, and vice versa. You can say either IP address to the domain name or domain name to IP address. And DNS spoofing attacks are launched by poisoning the DNS cache records to spoof a domain name and binding it with the attacker's IP address. So he is going to launch by poisoning the DNS cache records. So he is going to poisoning the DNS cache records to spoof that domain name with the help of this binding attacker's IP address. So here, if the client uses domain name to authenticate requests, then it will be compromised automatically, because the domain is mapped with the attacker's IP address, right? So the domain name is attacked with attacker's IP address. So is binded, and is going to use that communication. So here the company A with non-spoofable server actually, and a company B with a spoofable server. So now he is the spoofer, he is the attacker actually. He is the attacker. What he wants to do, he is going to use the domain name system with the help of his IP address. So he is binding that domain name to this his IP address. So now he is going to try some messages. He is going to try some messages to send this A and B. So what he is going to try to actually. So here the A is going to send outgoing emails from A to B actually. So now the C attacks B, so that the B going to respond to the A is with the help of spoofer. With the help of spoofer, the B is going to gives the response to the A, because the B is hacked by or attacked by the spoofer. So here outgoing emails from B to A go through the spoofer without the other two realizing it. So the B is attacked by this spoofer. So now the domain having this IP address with the attacker IP address, and now the mails are used mails are going to be sent to the A from attacker C. So now the attacker is going to send the mails to the A. So this is the way DNS spoofing attacks will be happen in the real-time communication system. So here the defensive against techniques, defensive techniques are against DNS spoofing. So one is what? Use IP address based authentication instead of using domain names based. So use IP address based authentication instead of using domain name based, because the domain names are going to bind with the attacker's IP address, right? So that they can use it for spoofing. They can use it for spoofing and using encryption to prevent forging DNS. Using encryption to prevent forging DNS. So before going to forging the domain name system, he is going to encrypt the domain name. He is going to encrypt the domain. So like the way DNS spoofing attacks will be launched in the real-time communication system. So these are all the different types of attacks and the different types of defensive techniques in the TCP/IP protocol, TCP/IP protocols. So once we will look at how the attacks will be happen and what are the different defensive techniques in the real-time scenarios. So the first one is what? TCP synchronous attacks. They are going to use synchronous mechanism to send multiple responses or multiple requests to the servers. And the second one is IP spoofing. So IP spoofing, there are different types of the attacks are there. Denial of service attacks, and defeating network security attacks, man in the middle attacks. And for that, the defensive techniques are against IP spoofing. Here encrypted session, access control list, filtering packets using upper layers. And the third one is connection hijacking. So how they are going to hijack the connection? Because of that connection is not a secure connection. Because of that connection is not a secure connection. So defensive techniques for connection hijacking also. Encryption, using re-authentication, and session timeouts also. And routing information protocol attacks. So the attacker is going to sit some particular place of the routing, and he identifies all the packets and is going to say that use this route for transferring the data. So like the way he is advertised the bogus information to diverting the routes for the packets. And some defensive techniques, encryption, filtering packets, frequently log analysis, and check routes before acceptance. And ICMP attacks. So ICMP attacks also used by the attacker by following ping utilities or sending multiple echo requests to the target system. And the DNS spoofing attacks. So here the attacker is going to use the domain names to binding with the internal IP addresses or IP addresses, so that he is going to attack the companies, so that he can able to send the mails from A to B companies. So these are all the different types of launching attacks, in the real-time communication system, and different types of defensive techniques against these all attacks in the real-time communication system. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.